It's finally time to cover my favorite movie of all time, Halloween. Oh, God damn it. The Saw franchise is quite the unique one. Starting off as a small 12-minute indie film by Lee Whannell and James Wan, it became its own feature-length film, as well as spawning 7 sequels, with a new installment arriving soon called Spiral, directed by and starring Chris Rock. The first few movies maintained a lot of mystery, with the latter half going full on with the gore, though the entertainment value remained consistent and fun. With the series almost emulating soap opera plot lines, with oh this guy isn't really dead and oh this guy was the killer all along, like story beats, it became a blast to catch clues and hints the writers would drop for us to figure out what the puzzles and mysteries would lead up to. I always had an attachment to this franchise ever since I played a few of the community levels on Little Big Planet. After that, I saw the first movie and I was hooked from there. Tonight, I'm going to share my rankings of every Saw movie we have so far. What better time to do so than a few weeks before the newest installment, Spiral. There will be spoilers, so viewer discretion is advised. This is just my opinion, and I'm sure I'll have placements that many won't agree with, but that's what makes these rankings fun. We get to see different perspectives and maybe notice aspects we wouldn't have noticed otherwise if it weren't for us contributing to each other's discussions. We have 8 movies to go through, so let's get started. Alright, so immediately putting this movie in last place, I'm sure will raise some eyebrows. I believe in terms of filmmaking, the biggest sin you can commit as a filmmaker is to allow your audience to feel like they're being a bit dragged. And honestly, this movie was just a bit too slow for me. According to some behind the scenes rumors, this movie is said to have been 2 separate scripts slapped into one. I can subscribe to that theory, because it does show in the final cut. The pacing of this movie goes back and forth with its consistency, with Detective Strahm being a sort of okay lead going through all the past locations of the franchise. It seemed like this movie was banking on nostalgia that hadn't had enough time to settle just yet. The main co-op game was really fun to watch, and all the traps were really neat, especially when we figure out the small twist at the end. Throughout the game, the players believe it's a battle royale, going in with it's an every man for himself mindset, but towards the end, the remaining survivors discover that each trap was also designed to be worked on as a team, encouraging them to survive together since the very beginning. That's hilarious. Imagine finding out the people you've killed off in the past hour could have totally been saved if it weren't for you being so selfish. Oh wait, here's your punishment. Instead of sacrificing a small paper cut, you have to saw off your own arm now. That'll teach ya. We got him there. I've come to find out the traps that give the opportunity for every party to survive are my favorites, instead of the ones that guarantee someone's death. I know most people go to these movies to see the kills, but I'm one of the few dozen who genuinely loves following the royal wedding. Have Jigsaw's twin brother come in and become Jig Herd. I'll eat that stuff up. At this point in the franchise, we've gained a lot of momentum with the first 4 movies, which I believe were all solid after solid entries. But when this movie was released, I argue that this was actually when the death of the original run of movies began. And I'll explain as I go with each ranking, but essentially the movie was hyped up very much for the fans and everyone was looking forward to it after the events of Saw 4. Unfortunately, what we had delivered to us was an incomplete story, and having a big twist at the end of every movie became a staple in the franchise, so they decided to force one out of the bag for this one as well by killing off the lead we started to root for. So there you go.
I didn't know the ending, and they started doing a cast of my arms, and I said, well, what are you doing a cast of my arms for? And he goes, oh, they didn't tell you? They're killing you off.
What did this movie accomplish? Well, now we have better insight on the new killer who took John Kramer, the original killer's mantle, Mark Hoffman. And boy, is Custis a great actor because I believe him in every scene. He sure lives up to his given nickname, Hoffinator. Regardless, this movie left a bitter aftertaste for many people with how slow it was. This is honestly the only Saw movie I skip when I do marathons of the franchise because it's the only one I genuinely find its liking. This movie is agreed upon to be on the lower half of the list, though the entertainment I get out of this one is a good chunk higher than Saw 5. So check this out. Because Saw 5 did poorly in the box office with both fans and critics, not as many people went to go see Saw 6. I feel like that's a big shame because Saw 6 was actually pretty decent. Because no one went to see Saw 6, the studio decided that it was time to stop milking their cash cow and end the franchise off with Saw 7. But oh wait, what's that? The original plan was to have Saw 7 be a two-parter, with Saw 7 parts 1 and 2 or just simply Saw 7 and Saw 8. So we could have had 2 full movies to explore the epic finale, and have further explanation on several mysteries we haven't gotten answered yet. But because the studio didn't have the budget for it because of Saw 5, they again squeezed 2 movies into one and we were left to see Saw 7. Try saying that 5 times fast. As you can see, this is why I believe Saw 5 is the worst, as it totally started the downfall of the franchise, in terms of the logistical numbers, and the story wasn't as strong as the rest. But going back to Saw 7, let's see the impacts of Saw 5 had on it. We have a new game going with a character called Bobby, who lied about surviving a trap before. He was gaining profits from writing a book about his fake experiences through Jigsaw, though Jigsaw, knowing he's a fraud, called him out on his capacity and puts him in a real game. So for a while now, when people have told me no cap, I always thought that was short for no capacity. Like I have no capacity for loving this thing. I love you, no cap, no capacity. Sorry I wasn't in class that day. Anyways, while Bobby goes through his game, we follow new detective Gibson, played by Chad Donella of Final Destination fame. I actually did like Gibson, as I think he added some underrated humor to the movie.
You're crazy. I knew you were crazy the minute I laid eyes on you. Crazy. This is what we're gonna do. Crazy. This is your new home. Crazy. Get comfy.
This was sent here addressed to Jill. Hoffman knows our location.
God damn it.
This movie has its moments, and having each level in Bobby's game be a part of See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Speak No Evil proverb story beat was pretty fun. The only thing I don't care for is that literally no one is saved in Bobby's game, let alone the entire police department gets killed off. No one, not one stinker gets away scot-free. No capacity. Bobby's wife gets killed off in the most horrible way to date, and she didn't even do anything wrong! The redeeming part of this movie is the ending, where we think Hoffman is getting away with everything until legacy character Dr. Gordon, making his first appearance since the original movie, comes in as an anti-hero and saves the day. Turns out, he's been helping the original Jigsaw out all along, and has been keeping tabs open in case Hoffman went haywire. And guess what? He did. The amazing thing about this is fans actually called this ending, that Dr. Gordon was aiding Jigsaw in previous games based off a few seconds of clues given throughout the franchise. Like when we see who appears to be Jigsaw limping in Saw 2, it's actually Dr. Gordon walking with a limp after cutting off his own foot in the events of the original Saw. Boy, do I love this community. And if you're new to the Saw series and are totally confused about the storyline so far, don't worry, so are we. Oh man, if you're a fan of Saw and you're still giving me a chance for the order of this list, you've probably given up at me at this point. Saw 3 is beloved by many as one of the better Saw films, but oddly enough, it just wasn't my cup of tea. What carries this movie is the relationship with the original Jigsaw, John Kramer, and Amanda, played by Shawnee Smith, who's become a fan favorite in the series since the original movie. They've developed an almost father-daughter relationship, with John mentoring her in his philosophies and rehabilitating her through her struggles. Shawnee Smith's performance may be one of my favorites from the entire series, as the character of Amanda is such a fun villain to follow, given her tragic flaws, overlapping in her own addictions, and her on-screen presence of threat and unpredictability. You can't help but feel empathy for this character as she digs herself deeper into worse and worse situations. So we follow Amanda as she tasks new player Dr. Lin into keeping John alive long enough during his last moments until fellow victim Jeff finishes an entirely different game on his own. Okay, that's a pretty good setup. But let's check out the main game, as this is where my main problems arise. I really truly do not enjoy any of these traps, the main reason being, it's up to Jeff alone in saving everyone instead of the victims trapped in the contraptions being able to save themselves. This is where I think the series took a turn for being more torturous over focusing on the mystery aspect. Now look, I'm all about creative kills, and I have deep respect for the art of practical effects, which is a big reason why I love this franchise so much, but if we want to go a bit deeper into it, I'm more of a fun gore guy than a realistic gore guy. What I mean is, there are kills in horror movies that can be clever, explosive, or humorous with the audience being in on the punchline, like the face melting scene in Fright Night. Alright, yeah, that's pretty gross and cool. We're in on the fun. But seeing dragged out deaths and seeing the victim suffer for a prolonged amount of time? Not too into that. Lucky for me, we eventually get to see a guy turn into an octopus. Oh yeah, we'll get there soon enough. In the original script, Cary Elwes was intended to reprise his role as Dr. Gordon from the first movie and go through the trials Jeff went through, with his wife Allison being in place of Dr. Lin. No disrespect to the actors Bahar Sumek and Angus MacFadyen, but the movie would have totally been elevated and more emotionally impactful having Dr. Gordon and Allison come back to close off the original trilogy. So this is an interesting one, as I wasn't sure where to place this on the list. I know it's a middle tier for me, and it really came close over the next movie on this list on which one I personally had more fun with. In this movie, we follow Officer Rig, played by Lyric Bent, who has found himself in a game of his own, except this time, his game is spread throughout the city, instead of being condensed into one area or facility. But that's a breath of fresh air, since Rig could theoretically go anywhere he wants, but his motivation in this game is to save other victims in their own traps in real time. He could just go to his department and report it in, but because time is so delicate in this game, he has no choice but to speedrun it. Alright, I'll play along with it. So here we are again, with the victims incapable of helping themselves and requiring Rig to save them. Even though I'm not into this type of game mode, I give the movie a pass since it's Rig's occupation as an officer to save others. But here comes the gripe. Rig is being taught a lesson by Jigsaw because he shouldn't be so obsessed with saving others. Yeah, it can be unhealthy to constantly put others before taking care of yourself, but I'm sure there's worse crimes being done in the Jigsaw world. We go back and forth in Rig's game, and the other officers try to keep up with him as they're always one step behind. The transitions make this movie. At first I thought it was done in the editing room, but the director got everyone to actually play this out in real time, so there aren't really any hidden cuts. That's pretty cool. 2 cents off. We also get to see some interesting flashbacks on Jigsaw's origin story. Upon investigation, it's discovered that John lost his unborn son due to a robbery accident, and John himself developed colon cancer and a frontal lobe tumor soon after. He naturally became depressed and attempted to off himself until he managed to survive his car crash. In that car crash, John died and Jigsaw was born as he gained a new path in life with different ideals. Man, is my INFJ crew looking rough. We also see other flashbacks with how the iconic pig mask came to be, as John's son was meant to be born in the year of the pig in the Chinese calendar. If we take this in a real world time, this means John's son was meant to be born in 1995, which helps us figure out the timeline of events a bit better. Movies 2 through 7 all take place within the same year. We know this since 3 and 4 take place at the same time. 7 is right after 6, 6 is right after 5, while 5 is immediately after 4, and 2 was a couple months before 3. If we give the original Saw its own respective year, this means the entire franchise may have taken place during the 90s. But oh wait, there's more! Taking in consideration how long someone would live with untreated diagnosed terminal cancer, John had a little less than 2 years to live since he became aware of it. So the new timeline is Saw 1 through 7 goes from 1995 through 1997. What an eventful time to be alive. Despite all the heavy subject matter, what's cool to learn is how the cast and crew would prank each other on set to keep light of things. With all the constant gore and deaths in these movies, a sudden fart machine going off eases the mood quite a bit.
The camera department has a fart machine, and it's been an ongoing joke that every year we hide the fart machine somewhere in the set.
It's still
My favorite part of this current game is the ending. Oh my god, what a banger. Basically, the writing team couldn't figure out a new twist after the first 3 from the previous ones. So what do? They combined all 3 twists into one. The killer was in the room with you all along. Saw 3's game is actually happening simultaneously during this game, and it was never Riggs' game to win, as the only way to win was to lose. That's right, Riggs loses the game because he got to his endpoint in time, therefore killing everyone he was trying to save? That'll teach you to be a good student on time. Shame on you for waking up 5 minutes earlier to build healthy habits so you could get there on time. Congratulations, you've killed everyone. This is a pretty big amount of real estate to process, but oh man, it somehow works. Jigsaw is a fresh, soft reboot of the franchise, making a comeback in 2017. This one really had a lot of mixed reviews, and I get it. Ultimately, this movie makes no sense. I sort of stopped trying 4 movies ago, so I'm all in with just the fun aspect of the series. Surprisingly though, I find myself rewatching this one a lot. It's practically a better version of Saw 5. The co-op game of 5 players have to work together to survive. There are detectives on the case who are suspicious of each other on being the new killer. A cool note to share is that this takes place 10 years after John's death, which, if we follow our previous rules of the timeline, would mean this movie took place in 2007, another year of the pig. Where does this game take place? A pig barn. Now that's good stuff. There's a bit more humor in this one, with warmer tints and color palettes, which isn't so bad. They were going for a different look, juxtaposed to the original 7 movies, and I'll always appreciate different takes and spins on things to keep it fresh. It's a risk that sometimes may not pay off, but it will infinitely always be better than just watching the same old thing over and over again. Respect to that. Now that's punk rock. So we follow new character Logan, played by Matt Passmore, as he gets delivered bodies of those who didn't pass Jigsaw's games. Every time someone gets killed off in the main game, a new body is discovered around the city. Our new team tries to figure out the location of this current game before it's too late. Here comes the plot twist, and why so many despise this movie. Turns out, the main game was never happening in real time, but occurred over a decade ago, when John was still alive. We've been going back and forth from around 1995 to 2007. It has to be 1995 because according to Saw lore, the Pig Barn game is the first ever co-op game hosted by John, and not the bathroom game from the original movie. This means the bodies Logan has been finding are an entirely different batch of people who also had their own game, and conveniently die the same way the people in our game got killed off in. You're killing me here. But wait, there is more. Turns out Logan was a participant in the original Barn game, but was saved by John because John made the error of sedating Logan a bit too much, causing him to sleep through the first wave of traps. John, in his almighty judgment call, deemed it unfair that Logan never had a shot to survive, so he saved him and brought him up as his very own apprentice. That's right. This was before Amanda, Dr. Gordon, and the Hoffnator. So now in modern day 2007, with John being dead, it turns out it was Logan doing the killings all along. We only get to become aware of that after seeing Detective Halloran become an octopus demogorgon. Yummy. This also explains why the traps are more primitive and simplistic, as this was John's early work in the 90s. What a triple-decker burger this movie is. It seems like a game to see who can come up with an even more ridiculous plot twist than the last. Sure, the twist was something else, but I found it completely refreshing that the comic relief of all people was the final survivor in this movie. It's also cool to see Laura Vandervoort kicking butt in this movie, as I'm a huge fan of Goosebumps. In the end, I find myself rewatching this one a lot, and it really is more entertaining than it is frustrating. The franchise finally had a few years of breathing room to develop nostalgia, so seeing some of the old school traps is a nice throwback as well. They pulled it off way better than Saw 5. At least that's just my opinion. Saw 6, the tragic film of the franchise. This film is actually really good, but because of the critical condition that Saw 5 was, we never got to see the potential this franchise had going forward. There wasn't as much hype surrounding the Saw movies anymore, so this movie didn't do well in the box office as mentioned before. We follow William Easton, a health insurance executive who denied John of insurance for the treatment of his cancer while he was still alive. This movie became a satire and critique of America's healthcare system as we explore themes of higher authorities nitpicking who gets to live depending on how much profit their companies can receive back. This movie had the guts to go for that storyline. Now that's punk rock. So we have Easton going through his solo game of again saving others that are incapable of saving themselves. But this has to be the best excuse for this game mode compared to Saw 3 and Saw 4, since it's a direct metaphor of how John views Easton's healthcare system. Instead of Easton choosing who gets denied access to treatments and cures for diseases in the safety of his own office, he sees the effects of him choosing who lives and who dies firsthand. Now that's gnarly. This movie is also home to many of my favorite series of traps. The facility is set up like a carnival of minigames you have to beat in order to progress to the next level. The ventilators were a simple how long can you hold your breath game. Then there's the aquarium, in which Billy the puppet hilariously presents himself as the friendly neighborhood game show host. Isn't he adorable? Then there's the steam maze, which is shaped like a labyrinth, in which Easton and his coworker have to work together to escape, and finally, the carousel. The carousel is probably the biggest fan favorite trap of all time, due to the rule of how it's played and a decorative design. There's 6 of Easton's co-workers on the carousel. Jigsaw decides to use Easton's healthcare algorithm against him, and that he can only save 1/3 of his participants. This means only 2 can live and 4 will die. Oh, aren't we having a grand old time? There's actually a theory that everyone could have survived every trap in this game. This was Easton's arc to go through, so what would have happened if the custodian survived instead of Easton? Would the custodian go through the same trials of saving everyone like Easton? My theory is that Easton was meant to make a noble sacrifice so that the custodian could win the game. and Easton was always safe from dying in the first round. This way, when they get to the aquarium, instead of Easton having to choose one victim over the other, both the custodian and Easton could save both, or Easton could just use his frickin' shirt. With the steam maze, the custodian can help Easton get the key to help Debbie out of her trap, and from there, all three can sacrifice a hand each to save everyone in the carousel. There's an even bigger theory that everyone could have survived every single game in the franchise without any deaths, but that'll take a whole other video. We also get to see a flashback with a rare instance in where the main three villains are all in one room together. I always saw similarities with these three with the characters from Animal Farm. John being Old Major and pushing his ideals to revolutionize his community, Amanda being Snowball, and Hoffman being Napoleon. My biggest gripe in this film is Easton's death. He may have had the biggest character arc and growth since Amanda. He started off as a pretentious and selfish rich guy who snobbily only cared about profiting his company, to learning what he's been doing all along has been truly ugly, and he's been filled with regret and wants to better the future. He may have even changed his company's policies to save more lives. This could have actually given John's game some debate on whether or not they actually work with rehabilitation, and could cause interesting discussions on morality. But no, Easton gets killed off just to give us another plot twist. Oh, it was never his game to win, it was always Roderick's over here, the guy who got introduced 2 seconds ago. Alright, here we go. Some say this is the epitome of the Saw franchise. We follow the duo father and son team, Eric and Daniel Matthews, Donnie Wahlberg and Eric Knudsen, as they go through Jigsaw's next terrorizing game. In this movie, Daniel is kidnapped and thrown into the main multiplayer game alongside returning player Amanda, who we've established is a strong recurring character, while Eric interrogates Jigsaw, trying his hardest to find the location of his son's game before it's too late. This is probably my favorite setup of any of the games, since there's more of an emotional attachment to it. Having your own kid in a twisted game by a well-known serial killer who you're right in front of while the same serial killer is the only one who can help you find your kid safely is a pretty messed up mind game indeed. In the main game, all the players have been poisoned and must pass several mini-games in order to obtain antidotes scattered throughout the house. Each minigame is designed in reflection of each player's vice. For example, the drug dealer must go through a pit of needles to find a key to open a door to his antidote. When traps are a direct juxtaposition to the character's flaws and story arcs, I feel the need to give credit to the writers, as when the characters survive their own test, it feels earned. This is also the movie where general audiences may begin to cringe at some of the injuries and deaths. The first movie was most definitely tolerable, but if you've ever seen a real life cut and wounds firsthand, this movie may be really hard to watch, and that's before going into the rest of the franchise. Basically, this is a good movie to test if you'd be into the rest of the series or not. In the last act, we get to see a really cool labyrinth trope, where Xavier plays our group's sub-antagonist in a Minotaur-esque role, while chasing Amanda and Daniel as they look for an exit. Eric manages to find the location through blunt force against John, and it appears that he's finally close to finding his son, but oh would you look at that, another plot twist. As it turns out, the game was not happening in real time, but was a recording all along. This means it may have ended many hours prior to Eric finding Jigsaw. Daniel survived and won the game and was inside of a safe with the antidote right next to Eric the entire time. If Eric had just stayed with John, everything would have played out just fine. But then comes the second twist. Amanda was actually an undercover agent for John to ensure Daniel's survival. John has been mentoring Amanda since her first game, to take up the mantle of being the next Jigsaw once John passed. Now this was one heck of a twist back in the day. One could argue that if the franchise wanted to remain as a trilogy, this could have been the third and final movie. A higher cast of people, stakes are at its highest, being personal with the officers now, and it sets up a new villain in Amanda to take over the future of this universe. I'd always encourage anyone to try out the first two movies to get a feel for the franchise. If you're not into them, don't feel obligated to keep going. If you dig them, you're in for a wild ride. The one that started it all. Am I a cliche yet? In 2004, tag team filmmakers James Wan and Lee Wanell created a short film that would later grow into its own feature-length film, the first Saw film. We follow Dr. Lawrence Gordon and photographer Adam Stanheight in the first ever game we as the audience get to see, the infamous bathroom. This bathroom has achieved its own legacy status, as it's almost become a character in itself. Bathrooms are where we go to relieve waste, and man, how many dead bodies from all over the series end up here. From the get-go, there's no establishing shot, so we know as much as the characters do and where we are in this story. They wake up suddenly to find themselves in a game in which they must find a way out of the bathroom in less than 6 hours. There are multiple ways to get out, but it requires us to think outside of the box. For Gordon, it's made pretty clear that all he has to do is kill Adam, and he'd be home free, but in good conscience, he tries to find another way. At first, Dr. Gordon is the logical thinking one, attempting to solve things rationally, while Adam tended to be the one who panicked a lot of the time. It's reflected in the camera work as we see Dr. Gordon's screen time as nice and steady, while Adam's time is shaky and handheld. It may sound like a movie that all takes place in one room can get dull rather fast, but many beginner filmmakers tend to use this challenge as a way to prove they can create a captivating story without abusing a budget. There's many puzzles and clues scattered throughout the room laid out for us to find. In modern times, it works like an escape room, where we look for those clues to find our way out. Escape rooms actually began as a point-and-click video game in 2004, right around when Saw was released in theaters. It wasn't until 2007 when it became more of a real-life game, perhaps a smaller-scale LARP if you will, live-action role-playing game. And of course, in the 2010s, it became an international hit. I would not be surprised if Saw had anything to do with its success. All of these films bring up the question of, what would we do if we were in these scenarios? Would we go through the game? Try to wait until help arrives, maybe just flat out have a panic attack? It's a terrifying thing to think about, but luckily, escape rooms allow us to experience the fun solving things and emulate the spook factor trying to escape a place where we're presumed to have been kidnapped without any of the danger. We're in on the fun. Perhaps it's the same psychology in why humans love roller coasters. There's always an itch on the back of our minds that at any point things could go wrong. A bolt could screw loose and we'd all fall off into the deep abyss. But deep down, we know we're safe, and we can enjoy the thrill of the ride. Dang, humans are sort of badass. Not only do we eat spicy food, the plant's defense mechanism in creating acid all over its body so predators would stop eating it, but we like to emulate us falling to our deaths for fun! Going back to Saw, as the story continues, the roles of Adam and Lawrence switch gradually. Lawrence slowly begins to lose his patience and falls mad and being stuck in the bathroom, while Adam begins to think more clearly and tries to figure out more ways for both of them to progress. It's an interesting arc where two men who are implied to have to kill each other do their very best in trying to survive with each other. Now look, I don't know about you guys, but in movies and stories, I have a habit of looking for patterns of 3. It somehow makes me feel better when I get to see a story progress following the number 3. Like in Coraline, where towards the end, she has to find 3 balls that carry the children's souls. From the 3 locations where we visit a total of 3 times each throughout the movie. If you're a gamer in the Black Ops 3 zombie storyline, our main crew must kill a version of their future selves each, and each character has their own map, totaling up to 3 maps before reaching the final one. It's a very gratifying feeling and this movie delivers it. Outside of the main game, they give us 3 other solo games to show us what Jigsaw is capable of. Inside of the game, our main guys discover a minimum of 3 clues around the room to further their progression. Overall, we follow 3 main characters, Dr. Gordon in his flashbacks, Adam in his flashbacks, and Detective Tapp in his journey of tracking down Jigsaw. Oh yeah, now that's good stuff. I don't know what it is about the first 2 Saw movies, but they always gave me a lazy Sunday vibe, where I could turn on Ion television or something and just enjoy a relaxing morning or evening. Maybe it's because they were recorded on film before they made the switch to digital recording for the later movies. Something about the grain and atmosphere makes it so cozy and fuzzy. I get the same vibe with Silence of the Lambs and especially Candyman. Honestly, if someone said Saw 1 and 2 actually came out a decade prior, I'd believe them. They're practically straight out of the 90s. There's still a bit of angst in them as well. The new metal soundtrack, as well as some of the attires and color tints of the film give it a mid-2000s look, which is beautiful. The plot twist comes at the end, where we are led to believe Zeb is the Jigsaw killer, only for it to be revealed that the real killer was plain dead all along. There were many clues to implicate it for us, as we actually see John as Dr. Gordon's patient, and the recurring theme of Jigsaw always wanting to witness his games firsthand. Now this was one of the biggest twists in cinema history. Out of all of them, I'd argue that this movie's ending is the one we all remember. Most people just didn't see it coming. I actually went to go see this in the movie theaters on its 10th anniversary release, and I dragged a couple of my friends to go see it. Will, Little Brian, Taj, Fluffy Brian, Luis, Hot Topic Brian, and regular sized Brian. They all hated it, which made me feel pretty disappointed. That is until the ending where they were blindsided and smacked in the face with amazingness. Luis ended up binging the entire series immediately afterwards because he couldn't get enough of it. This was my rankings list. So where does this bring us? Why do we keep watching this series of movies that only get more and more grotesque? Darren Lynn Bousman, the director of the latter half of the movies, even claimed that Spiral will have the most devastating trap in the history of the Saw franchise. And that's in hype of the movie. Is it morbid curiosity to see how far we can go with it? Do we just have fun seeing people tortured? This could be argued for the Mortal Kombat series, with all the fatalities getting more and more gruesome and creative from each installment. But maybe it's different because we know it's a game and all the characters will come back to life anyways. This is a universe where we can get impaled with our own blood and live to tell the tale, while Saw is just a bit more grounded. As a filmmaker, it's just great to see the practical side of the traps and seeing how they pulled it all off. They actually made real life traps that actually work. Every trap you see in these movies do in fact work in real life. They just switch between the real traps with a fake model dummy and the safe traps with the actual actors. Now that's commitment. Maybe these movies also set off our survival instincts, or fight or flights. It's weird how no matter how bad a person can be in these movies, we always root for them to survive. It's a testament to our empathy, how we could never wish this even upon our worst enemies. The answer I give is that we should prove Jigsaw's philosophies wrong with the things we do every day. We don't need to be put into these traps to be grateful to be alive. We don't need to be put in the face of death to treat ourselves and others kinder. We're capable of doing that already. Sometimes, if we stay in a bad place for too long, we forget that there's more to life than just our current state. There is more, and great things are in store for all of us. It's just about getting there. So if we can be anything, let's be kind. Thank you guys for watching my rankings of the Saw franchise. Let me know your rankings in the comments and any other future franchises you'd like to see a retrospective of next on this channel. I have another one coming up very soon, so that'll be in store for you guys. Have a good night. I'll catch you guys later.